Hi there, I'm Jamie Taylor. Welcome to Your Health Matters, brought to you by Kingman Regional Medical Center, your not-for-profit, community-owned hospital. This program is all about providing answers to healthcare questions that you or your family members might have. I've got a great guest on our program today, so I hope you'll stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Your Health Matters. My guest today is Eve Cardiff, who is a nurse right here at Kingman Regional Medical Center. Hi, Eve.
Hi.
Thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Jamie.
Well, you've got a pretty fun story to share, and so we're going to get right into that because you've gone from being a patient to being a student to being an employee here at Kingman Regional Medical Center. And that just didn't happen overnight, obviously. There was a transition in there.
Right.
So, first of all, how long have you been in Kingman?
We've been here a little over 10 years.
Okay, so you've been even longer than me. It's an old time, right?
It feels like it.
But what brought you to Kingman?
My husband's work.
Okay.
He graduated from University of Kentucky and had a job opportunity to go right into work here in this area. So he travels all around Kingman and brought our whole family.
So now, are you from Kentucky then, originally? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Okay, so you don't have that much of an accent.
Well,
a little bit, but not much. So you were sharing with me before the program that you had some health issues when you were pregnant with one of your children. Is that what kind of first tweaked your interest in the healthcare? Or
absolutely. I didn't really have a childhood dream of becoming a nurse like most do. You know, a lot of nurses will tell you, I just always knew I wanted to be a nurse.
From the time I was a little girl kind of thing. But
exactly. And I was 25 and had an odd, very rare syndrome that left me temporarily paralyzed.
Oh, how scary.
And so we
and
were...
that was while you were pregnant or after?
While I was pregnant.
Oh,
we were about halfway there, and I was actually like the 32nd pregnant woman ever in history to have gotten that. So I'm in some journal somewhere.
I was just going to say, talking about breaking the odds. Did you buy a lotto ticket that day?
Yeah, it was odd. And so kind of ascending from feet to head, I lost my own antibodies attacked my nerves. And so if your nerves are damaged, then obviously your muscles can't move. So that's where I lost a lot of my accent. I had speech therapy for months after.
Oh, well, that explains
so
that.
That's, yeah, I miss it actually. But anyway, I was at St. Joseph's Hospital in Lexington, Kentucky for about 7 weeks, and then had home health care with physical therapy and occupational therapy and speech therapy for about 5 or 6 months after.
Oh my goodness.
But my baby was born healthy and pink, and they weren't sure, you know, how it was going to affect him. And
scary.
We call him our fighter, and he is our feistiest out of all of our kids. So.
Now, was that your first pregnancy?
No, he was our third.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had little ones at home too.
Exactly. Our family and church family, we wouldn't have made it without him.
You know, rallied around and helped.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And the nurses were that was, honestly, I owed them so much. You know, being there that long and in, day out, and I mean, I even had to, you know, ring for them to come do anything for me. I mean, it was, I was so dependent, and they were so cheerful, and they truly cared for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So then you decided at some point in time, did your kids grow up a little bit?
Exactly. I was busy.
School.
Yeah, we have 5 kids total, and so had to kind of do my mom thing for that. I taught preschool, and education was my first love. That's what I thought I was going to do for sure. And so 7, 8 years later, when I had my youngest going to preschool and then heading to kindergarten, I thought, you know, what would I want to give back to? You know, if I went back to work, what would I want to do now? And education just didn't feel right at this time, and started looking into things, and honestly just kind of had an aha moment of, you should give back to that. You were the one that received so much, and I started looking into our program here locally. And
so you'd moved to Kingman by then?
Yes, we had been in Kingman, let's see, 6 years by then.
Okay, okay. So you came not too long after that.
Right.
Your healthcare incident.
Yeah, just a couple of years, so.
Very good. Okay, so when you came to Kingman then, who was your healthcare provider? I heard something about somebody that also helped with that.
Thanks. We moved here pregnant with our 4th.
Oh, okay.
And so I went shopping around looking for, you know, OB doctors, and immediately found Serbat Medical and their practice. And I'd never dealt with a group practice before. I always had, you know, our family doctor, our OB. And so I met actually all of the OBs at the time and loved all of them. But Dr. Tedesco just you know, we hit it off, and it was just our thing, and we had a successful pregnancy, and everything went great. And then after that, we suffered a 20-week miscarriage later, and that's when I really understood who he was.
Okay.
You know, doctors don't necessarily take your hand and shed tears with you and cancel his next day to be there every minute of the delivery and those things. And he just was so different from anybody I'd ever worked with before that I think that my loyalty to Kingman Regional at that point, it was sealed. You know, the deal was done. I just knew what they were all about. That if they had someone like him and the nurses that took care of me during that situation.
That's awesome.
I love this place.
Yeah, I do too. I'm pretty proud of it. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you decided to go into healthcare. So that's a big transition. And how does that whole process work? There may be some folks in our audience that are interested in going into nursing.
Sure.
So what do they do? How do they get started?
Absolutely. So I looked online at the Mojave Community College, you know, programs, the study, wanted to see what the requirements, it's all right there as far as what prerequisites you need to have, the co-requisites, and all the things that go along with each program. It's not just nursing, but there are, like we talked about, phlebotomy and medical assistant programs, all those things. So that's right there in their catalog. If you're not an internet person, certainly you can go right out to their campus, and Student Services has all that information for you also.
Great.
But the one thing you have to do is take like a compass test, it's called, and you have to take basic English, math, reading kind of tests, just to you know, show where you are and what classes you might need to start out at.
And
so that's the first step.
That kind of helps make sure you have the basic tools you need to be, because medical classes aren't going to be that easy. There's a lot of new words and jargon to learn and a little techie stuff. So that starts with that. Okay.
Right, and they'll get you right on track. They've got great counselors out there too. So once you take your compass test and get your application to go ahead and get started, then they'll set you up with a counselor and you're ready to go.
Start taking the classes.
Exactly.
And now, is it a 2-year program, 4-year program?
It's a 2-year nursing program.
Okay.
The co-requisites and the prerequisites take more time for you to get started. There's, you know, chemistry and psychology and a couple classes that you have to have before you can even apply.
Oh, okay.
You can apply before you've completed all of co-requisites, but there's such a demand that it's better to have as much of that out of the way, simply because of the the number of people applying and the workload. Right. So the 2-year program is the 4 semesters of the nursing program itself, along with clinical hours and lab hours.
Okay. So that's, and you do externships during that time, or is that after you take your basic classes?
Well, our clinical hours are basically our intern time, kind of our, for nurses, doctors are residency time. Our clinical hours for nurses are there in school. But the hospital offers an extern program to where you can work as an extern, in an extern position during school. And that is very helpful.
Sure, because then you're actually kind of getting some hands-on.
Absolutely. And especially if you know the department you'd like to go into and you extern in that department. I mean, half of the battle is really just knowing where things are and being familiar with, in an emergency, like in the ER, where that one...
Where the pieces that you're going to need or whatever, or that the doctor's going to need. Well, and there are so many different facets of healthcare. We've talked about whether it's OB or med surg or ortho or the emergency room where you ended up. But is that where you planned initially? Were you thinking ER?
No, not at all. Another great benefit that Kingman Regional offers our community is the scholarship program. And so when I got accepted, you have to be accepted into the program before you can apply for the scholarship. But once you're accepted into the program, you come and interview with the director of HR and the director of nursing, and they take many applicants, and they only have so many slots available. But since I had that scholarship for those 4 semesters, I was able to become somewhat familiar with human resources and just the people I would run into every semester, turning in receipts and telling them again, thank you for this great opportunity. And actually, an employee in the human resources, unbeknownst to me, called the director of the ER and said, you're going to want her.
Oh, that's
and so I was in the library studying my 4th semester, and you know, big test coming up, and I was already nervous, and I get a cell phone call from the director of the emergency room, and I'm
from
like,
Janet
Godey, and she, I remember holding the cell phone up to my ear, and literally sweat is like dripping down my hand, like, why are you calling me? Like, well, it's, you know, the emergency department certainly is just not where you anticipate being a brand new nurse.
Right.
And going into, and she said, well, you know, she asked me the same question. Did you want to come? You know, have you ever considered the ER? And I, word verbatim, said to her, when I'm a better nurse, you know, later.
I have some time under my belt here.
Exactly. Yeah. And anyway, she said, well, we'd like you to come in and interview anyway. And I said, okay. And so, you know, I met in a peer group interview with her and Jen Roller also, and a clinical lead. And it went really well. And they thought I had the right personality for what they needed at the time. And so they were fantastic at getting me familiar and a lengthy orientation and making sure I felt comfortable.
Well, that's good. So they made sure you kind of had the comfort level you needed, obviously, to do that job, as well as the tools you needed are important as well. So now, how long have you been in the ER department?
Since June.
Oh, so it's still fairly new.
Yeah.
That's still fairly new. Then that's going pretty well for you.
It is. I love it.
That's great.
I love it.
Well, and your first line, really. I mean, that's how I always share with people, the ER department. They're, you know, that's the first place that we a lot of times see the patient. Obviously, they come in through the emergency room, and the wide gamut of illnesses and injuries and good and bad that you see there. So it's pretty scary. It can be. So, you know, we're going to have a lot more to talk about, because I'd like to learn a little bit more about the kind of things you see in the ER, and then I know you've got some other fun things that you do on the side that I want to talk about too. So we're going to take a break right now, and after these messages, we'll come right back. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.